would broadcast it. It's supposed to fit into 15 minutes, so we'll see what happens. Well, thanks for having me here today. I wanted to go over 7 lessons that I've collected from people who've been doing platform engineering, running platforms, been platform owners for about 7 years or so, plus or minus, depending on who it is. And let's get right into it so that we can jump to it. Now, I like to collect these lessons. Oh, we don't need to say that. So let's get right into it. So we can just skip that. Well, first of all, hi, I'm Kote. I've worked at various places. I work at VMware now. I've been an analyst at places like RedMonk and 451 Research. I was a developer a long time ago. You can see the achievement that I won the last year when I worked at BMC Software on systems management stuff, if you remember that. So this idea of platforms is not only what I used to write software for, but being a developer, an application developer, it's kind of done on behalf of me, or who I used to be. Anyways, if you're interested in more, you can go to my website there, kote.io. There's a newsletter. I've got all sorts of podcasts, all sorts of things like that. If you're interested in topics like this, you'll probably into what I do there. So first of all, you probably know what a platform is. You've come across the idea, and it's been documented pretty well, especially in the last couple of years, thanks to places like the Platform Con here. But also, it's been around for a long time in many incarnations. Now, here's 2 examples of what a platform means today. And I think when you look at them, what you'll see is that it's really but it's really the collection of middleware, services, some of the configuration and monitoring, the packaging that you have for the software that you're running. Now, this is one of the first things to know about a platform is you only have a platform like this if you have developers, if you're running your own software that you're writing. I would almost call it a developer and application platform, but platform's nice and short. Now, what you also should notice here when you look at these 2 types of these 2 platforms is that there's not a lot of detail when it comes to the infrastructure layer, the container as a service layer. There's some kind of like naming of what it is and pointing to it. But I think this is something that perhaps isn't discussed that much or sort of proven out in the platform world at the moment. And that is that probably when you're focusing on putting a platform in place, you're not talking about managing the infrastructure. And, my theory, based on what I've seen over the years, is that you're also not talking about managing the container orchestration. Nowadays, that largely means Kubernetes. You might use it. You might run on top of it managed and built by someone else, whether it's in public cloud or one that you're doing yourself. But as you go into it and you think about all the things that platform teams are going to be doing, that platform engineers doing, I'm pretty sure they're not going to have time to worry about everything developers need, do all of the actual process and work, as we'll get into a little bit, that developers need, and then also manage and worry about the underlying infrastructure that they have. So that's the first thing that I would recommend. The lesson here is figure out what the roles and responsibilities are for the platform team that you have. And what I'm going to suggest is that you're going to find this stack is going to be pretty similar, almost no matter what you have, because it's not really like differentiating. Your platform ultimately is somewhat of a kind of a commodity is the wrong word, but it's nothing special. It's very important that you choose the right one, or you're going to have nothing special. But also try to figure out if you're going to have time on your team to actually manage infrastructure. And like I was saying, I don't think you will. I'm not sure that's going to happen at all. So the reason for that is because, as I'm sure, as hopefully you've come across when you've been studying what platforms are, is that platforms are there to support software developers, application developers. And what that means is, in comparison to back when I was doing this systems management stuff in the 2000s, when I got that really cool award, doing infrastructure and operations is a lot more about guaranteeing that something worked, guaranteeing the availability, the uptime, and also the budget for it, the performance for it, and that you were delivering this infrastructure per your constraints and your spec, right? Now, in contrast, when you're doing a platform, it's all about supporting developers. And as Thomas here at Mercedes went over, he's manages a platform team there in Mercedes based on Cloud Foundry as a platform. They've been doing it for 7 years or so. That's where I get the 7 in the presentation title. But the orientation that they have is not solely or primarily about delivering a service. It's about helping developers, right? The platform is for those developers. And this is where I think a huge shift comes in to platform engineering that you need to pay attention to. And that's thinking about building a product. You'll hear people say platform as a product, but it's always focusing on the developers and what they need and how you help support them. You're building a product for the developers who are your customers. Now, we in the vendor world, that's what we do. We build products to people. So you can actually learn a lot from what we've been doing in that area. And when you think about your platform as a product, what you're doing is you're product managing it. And you typically, well, not typically, you always have a role of a product manager. And this is a role that's very different than what you see in most infrastructure and IT organizations. In fact, I don't think it really exists that much in those organizations. Product managers are typically only for applications. But what the product manager is doing is they are the ones who are thinking about what is the best product that we can build. What can we choose this release cycle that will improve our customers, that will help them out, that's feasible to do, and that has value to it, that helps developers. So this product manager is a person, hopefully, a role that you add to your team, to your platform engineering team. And they're going through what I think is a very normal practice of product management, which is understanding what the users, the customers need, figuring out what's feasible to implement in a given period of time, your release window. I mean, I think a week or two is a good release window for any piece of software, even platform software. So when they have the team, the platform engineers work on features, they figure out which ones to put in there, right? They also go to various other stakeholders, obviously your security and compliance people, other things like that, and kind of get their input to kind of evaluate what features need to be in there. And then critically, and something that even us vendors leave out from time to time, obviously not at VMware, we're great at incorporating this, but other ones that I talk to, is you observe how people are using your software and you get this feedback loop in place where you see if what you're doing is valuable. And this is another thing that is different about thinking about a platform as a product rather than just some infrastructure or services that you're delivering, is you're not just delivering to that initial spec, but you're constantly tuning and trying to improve the feature set that you have to achieve the goals that your customers, the developers, have. So there's two things I want to go over as far as how you find out what those features are. So the first thing that you're going to want to do, and I would suggest you do this again, even if you think you've done it, is do a mapping of the complete end-to-end process of what it takes from someone having an idea to getting someone using their code in production, right? Not even developers doing a build or deploying it, but someone using it and then going back again, right? Some people call this a value stream. You could call it your pipeline. I don't know, words like supply chain get thrown around here and there. I just think of it as the end-to-end process that you have, whatever. But you want to go through and put up on a big board, have some of the representative people who work on this so they can inform you about this. Just write down all the things that need to happen in which order with which transitions, the boxes and the arrows, right? And then also put down kind of an estimate of how long not only each box takes, but how long each arrow takes. Because it's often in these arrows, the handoffs, the connections, where you're going to find problems. Now, why do you study this? Because this is, if you will, the factory of your organization to get software out there, right? It's what it takes to actually improve and do your software and get new features in there. It's the point of an application developer is getting pixels moving around on the screen, more or less, for a developer. So this is what you as a platform team, the better you can make this process, the better your customers will be. Now, there's more detail than that you can get into. And one of the things that I helped our teams here at VMware Tanzu document last year is what they call a developer toil survey. And this is a great, free to do, very lightweight, easy thing as a survey that you can put in place, and you send it out to the developers. And as a product manager, as a platform team, you'll get a sense very quickly about what it is developers are struggling with, the toil that they're facing, and how you can help them out. And this is a survey you can send out every month, every 3 months, whatever the period is. And as you look through that, you can get a sense that this is a great way to get a feedback loop in place to see how you're improving what the developers are doing, whether it's in the runtime platform, the application runtime you have, the tooling that you're using, whatever it is. The questions in this survey and ones you do on your own are going to figure out and probe what you need to focus on. Now, next, what often happens with the platform team is they have this old mentality of doing infrastructure where you deliver the service, you deliver the things that are needed, and the expectation is that people will use it, right? Because you've delivered it. However, that's not really how things work out in the platform world. Thinking about it from a product mentality, from us vendors and other people, you have to spend a lot of time marketing that platform and building trust in that platform, and even doing advocacy for that platform, whether you want to call it developer advocacy, platform advocacy. You need to build a lot of brand around it. You have internal conferences every 3 months where you bring people in to talk about how they've used the platform, to build up that trust, that kind of word of mouth is spreading it. But think a lot about how you're marketing and you're spreading the word about platforms. And as you can see examples of here, you're going to start to develop a brand, a name, even physical if you want, like books that go over what this is. And think about the things you consume yourself, the communities that you're part of that have platforms or software that you use. They also have all this marketing, this advocacy. Now, typically, you're going to end up hiring one person right from the get-go to be this advocate that runs this for you and travels around and does a role like I and several of my coworkers do, where you're moving around the community and being a developer advocate for them. So let's look finally at kind of rolling this out. I like to divide rolling out a platform in 2 phases, really, based on what I've seen. The first one is really to start as small, quickly, and simply as possible. And that is really, as a platform team, to pick one application team, one team of developers that have an application, whether it's a service that they're using or an actual app. Run a developer toil audit to find out what they're suffering from, and then work with them and do the value stream analysis. And then over about 3 or 4 months, work with them to get that application running on your platform. And this is going to be key because you're going to discover not only how a platform works, what policies you need to have in place, but you're going to discover all those things that are unique to your organization. And this learning, this feedback loop you're going to is key to long-term platform success. You need to give yourself this short amount of time with rich feedback to actually learn what's necessary to do. You can watch lots of presentations like this, but we're not going to be able to tell you everything that needs to go into there. You're going to have to learn by doing and trying. And you do that with one project so that you essentially have time to do it, and you also don't launch 50 projects at the same time and then have to go back and apply the learnings that you learned from that initial project. So start small. Now, once you get past that first small project, that's when you can start getting to scaling around like the 4, the 5th, the 6 months phase. And there what you do is you pick another team, right? And you go to that first team that you had, those first teams, and you pick some seeds, some people who can work with others and are a little bit like experienced at kind of training people, more senior developers, if you will, and you seed them to new teams. And you're doing this seeding, pairing and seeding as documented in the DevOps report a couple of years ago, and something that we've seen over the past 7 years people do all the time. And what you're doing is, rather than having people learn on their own or just by going to training, or worse, just reading a box full of books or something, you're having someone pair up with them with probably pair programming and other pairing, and they're teaching them, and not only teaching them the skills, but building up the trust in how things are working. You're spreading that knowledge. And then you find more and more people and pair and seed them over and over again, and you can see how this spreads to more and more teams. And after a year or so, you'll find that you have many more applications and teams running around it. But you want to take that slow and steady approach to really make sure that you're learning things along the way, and that you are building up trust and knowledge internally, right? So a platform is not just the technology that you put in place. That's an incredibly important part of it. And if you don't have the right technology in place, integrate it into the way that you in your organization run. And if you also are not deciding to allocate your platform engineering time appropriately to focus on the platform part instead of the infrastructure part, you're going to have a lot of issues. But it's also important to figure out how to do all that internal marketing and pairing and seeding to scale trust up. So there's some great, another brief presentation, if you're interested, from JP Morgan Chase that goes over this. It's really a great talk. It's very brief, and you can see the practices they've used to get up to the point where they're supporting 1,500 or so applications. So That was a bit of a quick tour through 7 lessons learned over the course of various organizations I talk with, doing platform engineering for 7 years. There's a whole lot more detail, even a longer version of this if you're interested in delving into. I write all sorts of books and write-ups like this stuff for free, which you're happy to use. And I'm always very interested in hearing what your experience is, what your questions are, and how things are going for you. So with that, good luck and thanks. So that was pretty good. It was probably around 14 minutes if you cut off the yammer at the top. The top. It's not really very detailed. It's more just pointing to things, but that's what you can cram in to 15 minutes. And yes, if you are watching this for some reason, there is a much longer version of this talk available there that you can check out. So now I think I've practiced that, and I can go record the actual thing.